Hello everyone, this is Introvert Shy Guy and welcome to my gameplay of Super Luigi Galaxy. So yeah, I'm making another SLG part. This time I'm definitely going to talk about Syria and just my thoughts on it and stuff after attaining enough information. Basically it's been about a year since this whole thing happened, so of course now I'm ready to essentially speak my views of what's happening and just my thoughts and everything. So that's what we're doing right now. So yeah, anyway, today's February the 13th. So yeah, I'd like to hang on. Just let's let's first figure out what comics to do. I already know which ones. I want there's one in the desert, one in the lava world. So we've got plenty to do. So yes, lots to do. I would say I'm definitely looking forward to it. So yeah, I guess I'll just start off with classes are still going. I have been playing Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and so far it's actually really good, I have to admit. It's very, the visuals are fantastic, by the way, absolutely gorgeous, I have to admit. I'm really happy with how the game turned out. And of course, it's just the beginning, and so yeah, it looks very nice. And I'm also surprised that they actually decided to stick with the controls that the Wii system used to have, which is the pointer thing, something like what I'm doing right now with the Wii remote. Of course, it's actually a lot different. As a matter of fact, I'll just like to add that it's not as good as the Wii version controls. I'm talking about when you use the two the Joy-Cons and you make one as the pointer, like the gun, and the other is where you walk and stuff, similar to the Wii controls. But the only difference is that because there is no sensor and stuff, it cannot tell if you are where you're pointing and stuff. It can only tell by motion sensing. So of course there's gonna be most of the time it just you gotta pause the screen and then play in order to reset the calibration and everything. And it's gotten to the point where I was I noticed I've been doing that a lot, and then I realized that yeah, the reason why that's happening because actually, we said we know where it is. Well, I mean, what we were gonna do. So yeah, I was gonna say in the Wii system version, wherever you point and stuff, it would actually know where you're pointing. But in the Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, the Switch version, because there's no sensor bar to know where you're pointing, because it's all just motion sensing. It basically just only tells where you're what a position the Joy-Con is. But sometimes you have to recalibrate it every once in a while. So honestly, yeah, it somewhat works in a way, but it's not that perfect. It's gotten to the point where I'm probably just gonna play it with just regular Pro Controller and stuff. I mean, I don't blame the Retro Studios for how they do with the control schemes, because I understand why it's like this. It's mainly because the Switch 2 and stuff. Maybe you could say they could have probably done better. I mean, it's not really retro. That's more Nintendo, I'd say. To have the Joy-Cons point in a certain direction, but it just wasn't the case. So because of that, I'm just gonna stick with the Pro Controller. But I mean, all in all, so far it's really nice and stuff. Yeah, shame I can't do the old-fashioned way where I used to use the Wii remote and stuff. But that's okay. I'd still enjoy it. As a matter of fact, I actually played Metroid Prime, the Switch version, and with using the Pro Controller, and it actually worked out great. So yeah, I could still do it that way. It's not the end of the world, of course. Yeah, so anyway, that was just my short tidbit before I get to warm up for what I want to talk about. So yeah, what am I supposed to do? Just shake? Oh, okay, you gotta wait for it to okay, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, as you guys are wondering, you guys want to know my thoughts on the new Syria and how it is, and so my thoughts on it. And I'll just say this: while it is unfortunately bad, I would say it was not as bad as I feared. It's bad, the situation right now, but honestly, from what I thought was gonna happen, it could have been worse in a way. And I'll basically go into detail. Okay, I'm gonna have to fucking go back because I now missed this point. And I'll basically just go into detail now about my thoughts and everything. So yeah, as you guys know, of course, the group that took over Syria, Hayat al-Sham, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. That's led by Ahmed al-Shara, or as you guys might know before as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, basically took over Syria, and Assad fled to Moscow. What the fuck? I was gonna say Assad fled to Moscow. Fuck, hang on. Don't fall. Okay. There you go. I was gonna say, okay, yeah. So Ahmed al-Shara took over Syria, and Assad fled to Moscow and everything. So of course now he is the new ruler of Syria, unfortunately. But what the fuck? Come on. I didn't do anything. It's just the fucking nunchuck. Actually, hang on. Maybe it's the nunchuck's problem. I guess. Let me try the new one. Not new one. I mean like the secondary nunchuck that I have. Maybe that could be it. Yeah. So it's ruled under a new person in power, I would say, and obviously it's not good because obviously as you guys know from watching my old videos, I prefer Assad ruling Syria, but from what it is, it's like I said, not as bad as I feared. Of course, there is more I want to talk about going into detail. So basically, obviously when he took over, I was fearing that there might be a new genocide or ethnic cleansing, I would say, for all the Christians and minorities and stuff. Now, of course, that has not happened, or at least did not happen in a very grand, large scale as I feared would happen. Of course, it has happened at certain points, usually in isolated incidents, and only one time where it was kind of, kind of a big massacre that happened in early March and stuff, and also sometime mid-July with the Druze when they did their offensive again when they tried to do their offense with Suida, but then they had to stop and turn back after Israel basically offered the small enclave protection. So so a lot of things are happening. But I guess what I'd like to say though is that despite the new Syria and what it is now, obviously it's unlike say being a secular kind of state, it's kind of an I would basically say how it is. It's basically now a country that really can't decide if it wants to be Islamist or secular, I would say. Or basically it is secular in certain areas, mainly the main areas like Damascus, Aleppo, Latakia, that kind of thing. Mainly the main areas and stuff, and of course the Christian areas. Whereas obviously the areas that are mostly inhabited by Sunni Muslims tend to be more of an Islamist kind of environment, I would say. Only difference is that many of the social conservative policies mandatory the hijab wearing and stuff, that has not been enforced by the government per se. So and all in all, it's not really it's not really a law or any certain degrading policy how am I supposed to say degrading policies, I would say, mainly obviously because I don't want Syria to be a Saudi Arabia or actually obviously worse like a Taliban Afghanistan kind of thing, but so far that has not happened in terms of the wider society, but it is somewhat happening, like I said, mainly in majority Islamist areas and stuff. Of course, there is some oh fuck, are you serious? It's an insta-death, yeah. That's okay, we got all day. Or at least until 10, because obviously it's a Friday right now, and I'm playing when it's the day when there's Bill Maher and stuff, so obviously I have certain time limit. But I do have plenty of time. This gameplay is going to be pretty long, by the way, maybe over an hour or so. So yeah, I expect it to be long because I have a lot to talk about. So basically, yeah, so it is rather, like I said, it's a country that can't really decide whether to be secular or Islamist as of right now, because, while not a lot of social conservative policies have been implemented by the government, it's only been, mainly enforced, I would say, just, culturally, I would say. Usually, if you were, in Sunni-dominated neighborhoods or, obviously in areas where it's, it's mainly socially conservative, then, of course, while there are no laws and stuff, you would be kind of be frowned upon or maybe even harassed if you're a female and you're walking around without a hijab and stuff. So but that's, like I said, only in certain areas. But if you're in the main areas and stuff, like I said, in Damascus and stuff, you're pretty much all right. Although I would say mainly if you avoid the Sunni dominated neighborhoods, if you go into the neighborhoods where it's where it's completely diverse, religious wise and stuff, you'd probably be all right, that kind of thing. So, but all in all, I would just say that in a surprise twist, I would say, like, despite, despite Julani, like, how he presented himself as, like, this, like, Sunni Islamist, like, warlord kind of guy when he was ruling Idlib and stuff. He used to be called the Emir, by the way, which is, like, in a religious context. And after he took over, he basically just trimmed his beard a bit. He still has the beard, but it's, like, not as, like, scruffy as it was before, and then is wearing a suit instead of a religious garb and stuff, and basically is, like, presenting himself as the so-called, like, moderate. Of course, not as secular as Assad, but not as, like, as, like, staunch and, like, ideologically rigid as, like, say, the leader of Afghanistan, or even, like, ISIS per se. A lot of people like to say that Syria has been under control of ISIS. Honestly, that's actually factually not true in a way, because, like, ISIS is much worse compared to Hayat al-Sham, whereas as you guys know, obviously, of course, like, Hayat al-Sham used to be al-Nusra, which was a Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, and only then did Ahmed Shara decide to, like, reform a bit and make it into Hayat al-Sham. Basically, Hayat al-Sham basically stands for the liberation of the Levant. So yeah, basically tried to make the group a little bit more inclusive on an outside sense, whereas, like, obviously in reality it has a lot of, like, Sunni Islamists and extremists, but, like, obviously, like, but tried in vain to, like, present itself as a, moderate group, I would say. Hence why a lot of people call them moderate head choppers and everything. So, but even still though, like, I would just say, like, the one good thing about that, or I would say one like, thing that happened that thankfully didn't happen, is that it's not a deeply conservative government, as you guys know. Like, it is still, like, Islamist. Excuse me. It's still Islamist in its presentation, but it's mainly in its presentation. Like, it's still secular in some areas. Although I'd argue, like, I would say that the government isn't really enforcing secularism, but it's basically just, like, kind of putting on a hands-off approach, I would say. Okay, hang on. Fuck, I hate how, you can't really tell if... Okay, you're gonna have to do it a few times. Yeah, it's mainly okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that the government's mainly has a hands-off approach when it comes to social policies. Like, obviously not implementing its own Islamic extremism, which isn't presenting Islamic extremism in a way, but it has some, like, I would say, like, some groups, mostly, like I said, within its ranks in the army, that, like, there are some, soldiers that do still pledge to Islamic extremism and stuff. But all in all, in broader society, not really much, thankfully, although, like I said, it's mainly in the shadows and everything. And there's also this big concern, though, that, another consequence of Assad being overthrown is that even if the government is not as, like, extreme or rigid as, like, say, the Taliban and stuff, it kind of has emboldened a lot of, like, a lot of Sunnis in Syria in a way, like, to be, like I said, much more extreme in their daily life, I would say. As well as also the fact that the group kind of brought in a lot of foreign fighters and stuff, like, say, a lot of Uyghurs and, like, Muslims from Southern Europe and stuff. I am aware that, yes, even the Assad regime kind of had its own foreign fighters. Mainly it's, like, Iran that kind of did this, basically recruiting Shias from Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Because, yeah, there are a sizable amount of Shias in these two countries, mainly, like I said, Afghanistan and Pakistan. So, yeah, I mean, Hayat al-Sham is not the only one guilty of using foreign fighters. Assad, as well, is mainly also used foreign fighters as well. Although I'd mainly pin it on Iran than, like, Assad in a way. But, yeah, so, just saying, like, it's not just these Islamist fighters that kind of use these guys. Even the regime is also kind of guilty in a way. So, but other than that, like, even when they kind of took over, back in December and stuff, Christmas was still celebrated, believe it or not. That's actually one clue that kind of made me surprised when it happened, when I saw that Christmas was still, like, celebrated, because I was kind of fearing that maybe they would cancel it and stuff, but no, it was still going. Okay. There's the coins up here. I'm gonna have to wait to be further in. So yeah, so Christmas was still celebrated despite what's happened, and you know there's even like a TikTok YouTube short on YouTube if you want to like check it out of like, you know, Syrian Christians like celebrating Christmas even on the same year as 2024 after Assad was overthrown, and they were relatively, I mean, they were actually, I would say they were optimistic but cautious, but yeah, they had a, you know, good head on their shoulders, I would say. So obviously, like, you know, had some, you know, positive vibes, I would say, despite what's happening. Now, of course, it's not all rosy and stuff, because like I said, the one big concern though is that the fact that there's a lot of like Islamist fighters in the ranks of the army. Now, of course, it's not as like concentrated as it was when it was just Hayat al-Sham, because now, of course, you have the new Syrian army, which you have like various groups, not just those that fought, you know, with Shara, but also like those that kind of used to be worked in the Assad regime, but now kind of are serving the new Syrian state, and also like new recruits, I would say. Maybe some that are like relatively, you know, live and let live kind of people, and not, you know, too conservative. Okay, hang on. Can I get it? Ah, fuck. I just really want to get this one. There we go. Okay, let's get those. It's very tricky. Oh. Okay. Yes. There we go. Got it. Just want to stop here. There's still more coins over there. And then, of course, we got to go down and ground pound. Yeah, so, so with the new army being rebuilt, like, you know, obviously there would be not a whole lot of Islamists, but of course, like I said, there are some in the shadows, because, like, there are those that still wear these, like, Islamic State patches and other patches that symbolize, like, Islamic extremism and stuff, so that's kind of unfortunate, but, you know, like, it is what it is. So it's like you gotta hope that they would try to, like, you know, get rid of it in a way and stuff, because if they don't and they just like keep it under wraps, that's gonna be a huge problem. It's gonna create like issues with like building trust with the army. So that's what I'm kind of worried about. So hopefully they would mainly like clean up with that. So like one good thing though is that now that the Kurds are like reintegrating with the state, you know, it definitely provide a lot of manpower with secularists and stuff, or actually those that like they could be willing to like maybe offer protection to like the religious minorities and stuff, whereas the Islamists, they can like work at like, you know, say guarding the borders between Iraq or Lebanon. Like they could basically say that they're guarding the new Syria against like, you know, against like Shia interference or something like that kind of thing, which is obviously ridiculous in a way. Why? Oh shit! I need to get. Are there any coins anywhere? Oh fuck, are you serious? I have to get a... Yeah, I have to. And yes, you can, you just gotta... do this. Okay. Alright. If I can just land on top. Yes. Yes. Oh, damn. Oh, well. There we go. Yeah, so... sorry, I was just gathering my thoughts. So yeah, so they could like, you know, be like just basically just like guarding the borders and everything. I would say maybe less so for Shia influence or anything, but I am aware also, yeah, Lebanon is not majority Shia, but you get what I'm saying, like, you know, the Shia areas of Lebanon, like where Hezbollah is mainly like, you know, located, I would say, like, you know, because I am aware that obviously not all of Lebanon is, you know, like, you know, not all of Lebanon is all Shia, but like, you know, there's... Oh wait, is there one up here? Oh, I didn't see that. Oh shit. I'm gonna have to wait to... Yes. Okay, hang on, I'm gonna have to wait for it to come back up. Yeah, so, Yeah, so they could basically like just guard the borders for like any smugglers, and I would say basically just be away from the civilian population. That I'd be okay with. You know, as long as they're far away from the civilian population, then all's well. And just have the Kurds basically just be the ones to offer protection for religious minorities and stuff. Okay. And then we'll start all over. There's only 2 of these tornadoes I have to avoid. So... Come on. Oh, fuck. Okay, there we go. Yes. Oh my god, you can do a far away jump. Okay. Oh shit. I'm missing a couple. I mean, no worries, it's only 3, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh fuck. It's because Luigi slides. Makes things a lot trickier. Anyway, so we're gonna have to just look around. Can I? Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. So, let's try going down here. Is this where I started? Well, this is the underside though, so... Let's see. Oh, on top of... So... Okay, that's where the last ones are. Nice. Just on top of that thwomp. Okay, yeah, so... What was I gonna say? So, yeah, so, so the fact that, like, you know, it wasn't as bad as I feared and stuff. Obviously, then you have, like, you know, the Druze that want to be separatists and stuff. Which, I mean, I don't blame them, considering, like I said, the leader of Syria was a former, like, you know, Al Qaeda terrorist. So, you know, like, I don't blame the Druze for being untrustworthy. But the problem is, though, is that, like, they're advocating for Druze separatism and, like, being very intolerant towards, like, say, the Bedouins and, like, you know, other groups, like, you know, that are vulnerable in a way. Okay, hang on, I'm gonna... Okay, we can just use... Probably this might help. Have to wait for it to... Oh shit, maybe I should have done that earlier. Okay. Yes, gotta do it early. Hang on. Yeah, I got... That was too late. Too early, too late. I don't know. You get what I'm saying. Hang on. Come on. Got it. Okay, it's right where the calm tornadoes are. That's good. Alright. Yes. Just gotta slowly go back. Alright. Alright. Sorry if I'm paused on talking, just trying to regain my concentration. Because right now, I got the star. There we go, got it. And then we can do the lava planet now. So, yes, we still have time. And yeah, so... But basically, it's not as bad as I feared. As a matter of fact, a nice video that kind of came out, and actually it was really nice that even though I was kind of like my late start with like making a video like this, I'm actually kind of happy that that was the case because coincidentally, last week a YouTuber by the name Britannica, his name is Callum. I actually really like watching his videos. He actually just uploaded a video last week of his travels in Syria. So yeah, if you guys want to know what the situation is like on the ground, like you can just watch his video. I'll leave a link to it, of course. So you know, definitely look at that video because it was definitely like you know, a nice little like you know piece of information I would say. So I'm really happy about that. Okay, so now we gotta go to the very top for the lava world. That's what we're gonna do right now. So I know I could have just gone to the Toad area, but I'm just too lazy to. So uh, so despite what happened and everything, like things are relatively okay, I would say, or like I said, not too bad. Like it could have been worse because obviously you have the unfortunate massacre that happened in early March, and also the terrorist attack that happened at St. Elias Church back in June. I was also really happy that nothing bad happened in Christmas. That's actually also another thing that I was really happy about. I'm also surprised what happened in Christmas of last year in 2025. But, apparently like Christmas was openly celebrated in Idlib out of all places, even though like when it was under the rule at the time of Hayat al-Sham, like that shit was not like allowed, or at least not like didn't feel very like permitted, I would say, but now it kind of is, which is pretty funny in a way. Just like it goes to show that like yeah, there is some hope. I would say the fact that there was like some Christians in Idlib that were able to openly celebrate with no problems. So I'm really happy about that. Not saying that Idlib is an ideal place to do this kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure they do get dirty looks and stuff, but that's probably about it. Like other than that, like they just mind their own business. They probably also just stick to their own community and their own area, and I guess they're mostly all right and stuff, aside from a few harassments and stuff. I actually heard that there are like some instances where like some Islamists like kind of like use loudspeakers and try to and ask them to convert and all that shit. So yeah, it is a thing, but I don't know if it happens all the time or just like once in a while. But yeah, there are a few problems here and there, but other than that, it is like mostly peaceful for these groups. Aside from, like I said, a few like killings here and there, mainly from the Alawites, unfortunately. Like I heard that there was like some kidnappings of a few girls and females, and as a matter of fact, also a few like just random killings. They like I read on like I look in the news, like there's like some guys in motorcycles, they like approach like random women or just random like Alawite men walking. I guess they just shoot at them and like leave. So it's like they basically just do the whole like silent ethnic cleansing kind of way, like kind of drive these groups in fear in hopes that they like leave in mass, like so then the Sunnis would have control in these certain areas, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of intimidations going on here and there, and like I don't know if the government is working on it or just maybe very lackluster at working on it, but yeah, those are kind of the realities and stuff. But as I've said, like the one positive thing, it's not like government wide and stuff. It's mainly just sporadic and like kind of isolated instances in a way. So that's kind of a relief thing to hear, and I guess that kind of like leaves off to what I want to speak about is like this whole thing about the civil war and like Assad just basically like just fleeing and everything. So like basically then why just go through it if it was all gonna come down to that in a way, like the fact that he was on the verge of victory, and then like basically Turkey kind of prevented Assad from fully liberating Idlib. And that's actually another thing I kind of like read about that kind of like relieved me in a way, because I always thought that when they were on the winning, when both Syria and Russia were on the winning path, Turkey kind of proposed a ceasefire, and then Russia just readily agreed. Like I don't know if like I actually thought that maybe that Putin got something out of it in a way. Like maybe I guess like say no sanctions would be implemented by Turkey if, say, like for an example, they were to do an invasion of Ukraine. Like that's kind of why like both Turkey is kind of like I was saying that Turkey is kind of still open with Russia and providing flights and trade and everything compared to Europe. So it's like I don't know if like before I thought maybe that ceasefire was like kind of part of the deal in a way, but actually no. It turns out that ceasefire was kind of done in Turkey's terms. I don't know if I should do this. Actually, no. I want to do the lava planet. That's kind of, or I'll check the other planets, but the lava planet's kind of what I want to do, or maybe something shorter if I'm running out of time, because that's kind of what I planned. So that's what I want to do. So yeah. But it turns out that this whole ceasefire thing, I think it's called the Ankara ceasefire. Yeah, that was kind of done on Turkey's terms, because right when they're doing the offensive and stuff, and they kind of struck a few like Turkish soldiers, then Turkey kind of provided assistance to the rebels. As a matter of fact, they kind of implemented a no-fly zone in the Idlib area, preventing Russian jets from using their air support for Assad. So because of that, like they were kind of forced. They were legit like forced to sign a ceasefire with like Turkey and stuff, because as the unfortunate thing that I kind of realized that if had Assad like just not did the ceasefire and just continued, he would have effectively just gone to war with Turkey. And if that were to happen, then yeah, he would have been done. Like, Turkey's military against Syria, especially when it was like sanctioned to death and everything. Yeah, no chance. So of course they had to like do the ceasefire and maybe like do a little waiting game, I guess, like see what happens, that kind of thing. But they didn't have it like many options and stuff. Their hands were basically tied, so they kind of did their best in a way. Unfortunately, that's kind of what I learned about. And then of course, then the offensive happened, and like I guess before a lot of I kind of looked at like. A lot of news said that it was mainly because like Russia was like bogged down in Ukraine, that they were not able to help Syria. Honestly, that wasn't really true, because they were providing like aircrafts and like air support to Syria and stuff. Now, of course, I guess maybe they were probably saying like when they lost Aleppo. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like in those like 3 days and stuff, maybe they were just unable to like get the jets ready in order to like help in the defense or something, because like that maybe a lot of their jets were being used in Ukraine, I guess, and by the time it was already in flight, like maybe it was already too late. Yeah, I don't really know about that. Maybe I guess like that could have been, but honestly, from looking at it, no, I don't really think it was. I think a lot of people like said it was in the beginning when they like kind of lost Aleppo and stuff, but then of course then they kind of lost the entire country, so it wasn't really like the fact that like Russia was bogged down. Like there were a lot of factors, and honestly the Russia being like in Ukraine and stuff, honestly I don't think it had any effect on it. They did have the resources to provide like enough assistance to Assad, because mainly all they did was just provide air support, which before I literally thought that they probably provide ground troops and stuff as well, but no, it was just mainly air support. The only Russian like soldiers that were on the ground were mainly officers and stuff that were just there to like keep the peace and security. They were not there for like offensive attacks and all that. So yeah, so I would say it wasn't much of a Russia being busy with Ukraine, but though Iran being like battered with Israel does make a lot more sense, considering that like they were like doing tits for tats with missile attacks and everything, and of course Israel attacking Hezbollah and everything. So yeah, it was not really the Russia-Ukraine war that kind of did it. It was mainly the fucking the Gaza conflict and like Hezbollah like getting tied up with Israel in a way. That's kind of what sealed the deal, unfortunately. So yeah, that was kind of what happened. And then of course, then like Assad then had to escape because of that. And honestly, like I remember like speaking to my dad about it, and he basically said that it was probably Assad that probably like called off on like holding on to Syria and decided to just like let go to the rebels and everything. So and in a way, I guess that probably makes sense, considering that the entire scenario that Assad was dealing with, the fact that he had to manage an economy that was being choked to death, and like a lot of corruption, especially from like certain people like say Rami Maklouf, who actually like he's one of the few people that I actually do despise, even though if he was in Assad's inner circle, and even Assad did not have a good relationship with him. Yeah, there was a lot of problems here and there with both these men, and I do kind of blame this kind of corruption that was probably what like did it in a way. I just was trying to make sure. Okay, one in the garden, engine room, bedroom. We went to the bedroom before, but I didn't see anything. Maybe I did. I had probably one I didn't like, I guess. Okay, let's check the engine room then. Fuck it. Where would that be? Okay, I know where it is. Over there. Yeah, so and also another thing that kind of backs up the claim that maybe it was probably Assad that kind of raised the white flag was, there's this group called the Syrian Resistance Movement, and they literally said that there were a lot of like fighters and soldiers that were motivated to protect Assad and like protect the country, but they were given orders to stand down. And now, of course, they basically said that either Assad probably gave them the orders, or maybe it was probably Russia that engineered it. And, it might be a possibility. I mean, also another thing that I kind of find kind of untrue in a way is I remember, like, when I watched the video from Britannica, from Callum, he basically said that there was rumors that Russia was bombing, like, Ba'athist positions. The Ba'athists, though, are, by the way, those that were part of the Assad government, that, like, basically bombing Ba'athist positions to allow the rebels to like take over Syria and stuff. Honestly, I kind of find that implausible, because I had never heard or read anywhere of Russia basically providing, air support or airstrikes against like certain like positions and stuff. Now you could say that maybe like Russia basically like I guess cutting off communications with certain officers and soldiers and everything, which made them disorganized. That could be a possibility, and that, I mean, I really don't know because, yeah, of course, Russia. I read that they were in contacts with Hayat al-Sham, so it wasn't just with Assad and everything. And also, as you know, that just now they actually do have like, I would say, a working relationship with each other. So even though Putin was like assisting Assad and stuff, they didn't really break away relations. They're still like in like they're still working together and stuff. Obviously, they're not like close allies and stuff. They're kind of more neutral. In a way, I'll say like maybe in the same way Qatar is with Russia or Brazil is with Russia. Like they still have some decent relations between the two, but they're not like very very close. And like unlike say what they used to before and stuff. So yeah, it is a significant change. But other than that, like not a significant departure. Which is kind of like good in a way, because like I mean like you kind of look at Vietnam and like despite suffering like even more horrific atrocities, I would say even more so than what Russia did to Syria, they still have like friendly relations with the United States despite what we did to them. So yeah, it kind of works the same way with both Syria and Russia, even though Syria was like kind of like America, fighting against the rebels and stuff. Even though they took power, they still have decent relations. I am aware, of course, obviously there's a few extremists that don't want that, but it is kind of the reality and stuff. And I mean, props on Putin on like being a grand chess master when it comes to this stuff. I mean, he did after all. He's the only country that has relations with the Taliban, so it wasn't really out of the norm for him to like seek better relations with the new Syria and stuff. So of course, like that was to be expected. And honestly, I'm not really upset about it, like because I view this as Russia still like doing their like their best to challenge the U.S. hegemony, and of course it's maintaining those bases in Syria, which I do support staying there, or I would say I support those bases staying in Syria until the U.S. empire fully collapses. I mean, once they're collapsed, then yeah, these bases can go away for all I care. Because honestly, I prefer a country that is fully sovereign with no foreign military bases. The only exception is if it was to help countries like Russia or China basically counteract the U.S. empire. But if the U.S. empire like ceases to exist, then these like certain things are not needed anymore. So, yeah, before I was for those bases staying mainly to maintain security for the Assad regime, and also, like I said, to basically like provide support for Russia against the vicious U.S. empire. But of course, now that Assad is gone, now it's mainly just to provide support against the empire, that kind of thing. So, yeah. But yeah, there is that. So, but I would like to believe that I think it was probably Assad himself that probably raised the white flag, because because I firmly believe that God would offer anything to provide Assad with full protection and like to keep Syria as it is. I mean, like maybe the worst case scenario, he probably would have blocked off the offensive, but maybe would have lost Aleppo for some time. But even still though, despite him persevering, or at least not persevering, like surviving, it would have been much worse for him in the long run, because then the economy would because then the currency would have dipped even more. He would have lost a lot of investors, a lot of a lot of resources from Aleppo and stuff. So yeah, he would have been in a dire situation. It also doesn't help that the fact that the southern Suida region was starting to be very much discontent with his rule and stuff. So he was probably sensing all this and just decided that he did not have the resources to keep the country going, and instead of having the people suffer, he decided to just he decided to just raise the white flag and just fled. Which honestly, I don't blame him for what has happened, because after looking in the long run, especially how Trump is right now with how what he did to Maduro, it was clear that Trump, he was not the peace candidate as he was before. Actually, hang on, I should have checked the top place. I'll come back to this one later. Gold coins in the I'll come back to this one later. Just right now, I just want to see if I just want to see the lava planet is available. That's what I want to do. I mean, hang on, how much time do I have? Yeah, about 30 minutes. Okay. Yeah, so. But other than that, like, you know, so then I like to believe that either like he himself decided to, like, you know, to leave on his own volition. So that kind of like fits into the context of, like, you know, there's that meme, like, can't Mossad the Assad, because the fact that, like, Assad is so, like, you know, managed to survive every single, like, unfortunate predicament, and he always, you know, just comes out standing and everything. You know, that is a real thing, because, like, as I've said, I do believe that, like, God was fully protecting, you know, Assad and, like, you know, Syria in a way, and that anything that Assad would do would, like, you know, would follow through. And it's only Assad himself, if he had his own, in his own free will, if he decided to give up, then, like, the rest of the country would give up as well, in a way. So, like, you know, I do like to believe that, like, you know, the only person that could Mossad the Assad was Assad himself, basically. Or it could have been the second option, mainly, that, like, you know, the fact that, like, probably God only, like, you know, probably could, you know, could only maintain Assad's rule for only a specific amount of time, and only, like, made him stay ruling, I would say, until, like, mainly, I would say, many of the certain, like, Islamist terrorists were killed off and everything, and have, like, you know, someone like, say, Ahmed al-Shara, even though he is, like, a bad option, like, managed to basically, like, take out certain bad people that would have maybe been a terrible influence for the entire country, and leave it off in a certain bad scenario, but not really a worst case scenario. I mean, essentially, it's a bad scenario, but there is, like, this one chance, like, this one light at the end of the tunnel, where there is a possibility where things might look up, I would say. And that could have been it, like, you know, that maybe, like, you know, as things went on, like, as certain, like say the right people were killed during the Civil War, that would prevent a dire situation from happening, that would allow, like, you know, say, even if Shara came in power, it wouldn't turn into a very bad scenario in a way. And, like, you know, when that happens, and Assad's time ruling Syria is not needed anymore, so of course then God would, like, forfeit the protection granted to him, and then, of course, like, you know, it's essentially Assad's time to either, like, stay behind and, like, potentially get the Gaddafi treatment, or basically just flee and, like, live in Russia peacefully, I would say. That kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of like what I believe. And another thing that kind of collaborates with my claim is that there's, like, oh wait, did I mention it before? I said about the Syrian resistance movement, this group, that they basically mentioned that like, they said that, you know, that there was a possibility that it was Assad himself that kind of called off the offensive, the attack, I would say, against the rebel forces. So yeah, that is a possibility. I'm not saying it's true, though. It could be not, but, you know, that is something to take account for. And even my dad said the same thing and stuff. I don't know if that might be true, but I also looked at another source of information from a pro-Syrian opposition source that kind of mentioned that even though, like, there was a lot of things that were happening, that there were still, like, you know, Syrian forces that were loyal to Assad, that had the motivation to fight back, and also there were still Russian jets that were able to participate in the defense of Assad. So of course there's a lot of, like, question marks onto how this whole thing, like, came to be and stuff. Could be possible that maybe Israel kind of did, like, a secret thing that they did, like, you know, that maybe allowed Assad's regime to fall, like, say maybe they like cut off communications or something like that. Some people, like, said that maybe they kind of detonated a few communication devices similar to what they did to Hezbollah, to a few, like, Ba'athist forces, and that could be a possibility, but that was only what I heard, like, briefly. But no, like, news source kind of covered it the way that it was, like, something that was actually happening. So I kind of doubt it. Like I said, take these information with a grain of salt, but that's kind of what I was hearing and stuff. But yeah, but all in all, I would say that Assad, like, staying in Syria was still kind of meant to be in a way, because had he left, especially during 2011 and stuff, I firmly believe that Islamic extremism would have, like, taken over Syria, like, specifically ISIS, because even though Hayat al-Sham managed to take over, and now they're ruling the country in a state where it's while not secular, it's not Islamist. You know, the fact many of its groups do profess to be, like, very conservative and hardcore Islamists. So that's like, so the fact that if, say, Assad were to leave before and like then ISIS were to gain ground in Iraq and then in Syria, it's plausible that many of Shah's forces would have like probably joined up with ISIS, made things a lot complicated, and they probably would have won in Syria, like the Islamic State, and then like things would have been very bad for everyone. So so Assad in a way was kind of like the block, I would say, that prevented these extremists from gaining power. And once they were to a point where they were like disorganized and stuff, or basically like I would say a few cells and stuff, because like ISIS is still there in Syria, but they're mainly like in the few thousands and stuff. And then like I said, they're very much disorganized. So and hence they operate in cells rather than like organized groups. So of course, him leaving in 2024 did not amount to them getting a lot of influence. Now, of course, there is a big question mark onto how things would turn out, because as you guys know, of course, the Kurdish regions kind of now have integrated into the Syrian government, and there is like some reports of some ISIS prisoners being set free and stuff. So I don't know if many of these guys are either going to regroup and like be a problem and stuff, or if more likely they're just going to stay underground, or like maybe go to Iraq or something like that. Mainly to stay underground and operate as terrorist cells and stuff. And basically then you'd have the Syrian government and of course the United States basically be the ones to try to clean up the mess, basically. So yeah, that is a possibility that of what's happening, if maybe ISIS would reemerge, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, okay, got those. Okay, hang on. Yes. And then you have, yep. Alright. Oh. Do I have to, oh, we can go that way. Hang on. Oh, so a flame. Question, I think I have to take care of that before I go over there. But we're working on it, so it's all good. Okay, hang on. Are there any... Yeah, I wonder, are there any, like, coins in that green platform? I don't think there is. That means I'm going over there for nothing. But I think it's all good. Yeah. Okay, hang on, I'm just checking the time. Okay, 5 minutes is past. Yeah. So we're still good. Still good. Yeah, So yeah, you could say that Assad's regime, when he was ruling, even since the start of the civil war, is probably meant to be in order to like stabilize and like say for the rebels to like clean up the mess and stuff. I know I'm calling them rebels and stuff, but I mean they're basically like terrorists in a way. But I mean, because for how things are right now, I mean like it is surprising on like how things are not as it seemed. Like you'd think that maybe that it would be like an ISIS 2.0 kind of thing, but in certain ways, I would still like, I'd still call, I guess maybe I wouldn't like, from how they are, maybe I wouldn't call them terrorists. I basically call them like Hamas 2.0, I guess. Like they're not like unlike say like Hamas, they're also not really a terrorist group, but they are like an Islamic extremist kind of group. So yeah, they probably do operate the same way. Although I have more respect for Hamas because they like have good relations with Iran and participate in the resistance against Israel. Whereas you have this government now that has some inclinations to work with Israel and stuff, and not like be what the Assad regime used to be, which was like complete and total complete and total resistance against the Zionist regime. So yeah, they're basically not as like valiant as like Hamas and stuff, but they're still similar to Hamas in ways that they do profess religious conservatism, whereas like while still respecting certain like religious churches and everything, because like even in Gaza you still have churches still up there, and like even in Syria now you still have churches still up and stuff. So I was really happy with seeing that. You also have the statue of Mary. I actually visited that statue back in 2010. Like it's also still up. So yeah, all in all, it's not too bad. But like I said, you still have like certain shady groups that are like operating in Syria, like certain gang members and everything, and those people are a problem. So I hope that were to be dealt with at some point. But it remains to be seen how things go. And so, yeah, and then of course, then you have the Kurds now integrating into the Syrian government. And honestly, like I said, I do support that, and especially now it gives an added asset that now you have these secular groups that are now joining the army. So it would be a huge huge bonus to it. Now, my thoughts on Kurdistan and stuff. Honestly, you know me, I am in favor of certain determinations of certain groups if they wish to have their own country and stuff, provided that they provide rights and to certain minorities within these countries. Because if they don't, then of course the government then would have the right to annex it in order to protect these groups. Kind of like Russia is doing with the Russian-Ukraine war, trying to protect the Russian-speaking population and stuff. So that's something I do support, and it is something similar to if say, I guess maybe how the Druze are acting, if they are acting very intolerant towards towards Sunnis and everything, then yeah, then it has to be something like that. Hang on. Okay, I'm gonna have to. Yes. I don't think there's a coin up there, so we can just... Oh, okay, so it's just in this area only. I don't think you have to go to the volcano. That's good. Okay. Just hop it. Oh, shit. Alright. Yeah. Here. Right there. Now there's of course a volcano. Can I... Hang on, can I go up? Or should I crawl up? Can we do this? No. Okay, but there is a sling star up there, so we could use that. Yeah, so... But all in all, I mean, the Kurds should have known that the U.S. was not going to stick by them and stuff. They were only sticking by them to deprive Assad from, keeping the oil fields and the wheat fields from him, providing oxygen to his economy and stuff, and hence also make him more likely to persevere and stuff if he had a better economy. So, that's kind of the main reason why they didn't, they kind of assisted the Kurds in a way. It's mainly because of that. And now, of course, the job is done, and that Assad is not around, and you have a leader that is less likely to be very close to Iran and Russia, and more likely to be close to Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, three countries that the United States also has good relations. So then, of course, you have the United States government willing to side with with Ahmed Shara and stuff. Despite even him being a terrorist, unlike say Assad, who's a statesman and stuff, and versus a terrorist. So so there's that. So yeah, but as I've said, it's expected because that's Trump, because he's a he's a deep state serving globalist politician that just happens to have once in a while as a loose cannon in a way. Okay. Alright, I don't know if I'm gonna get hurt from this. Okay, good. Yeah, anyway, what time? 9:42, so still good. Alright. I'm not worried, because I got enough health, so I'm good. I think it's over there, right? Excuse me. Oh, okay, it's right there. Alright, yes, so... Yeah, so there's that, and, I guess the only thing that like leaves off to is that what about Assad? Well, honestly, of course, like considering that he is now like a civilian per se, I do support like even though I have great respect for him, I do support him like being sent to the Hague and everything for like him and his wife, by the way, and his brother Mar al-Assad for like I said the crimes that they've done to civilians during their rule and stuff. Because even though like I said, I do have respects for like people like Assad, Saddam Hussein, and Gaddafi and everything. Like I am like a principal supporter of human rights and mercy and everything. And obviously these leaders do not evoke these kind of things, and they do perform torture. So of course I am principled in that these individuals do need to face consequences in a way. But all in all, like despite what Assad's done, he is certainly far less like evil compared to Shara. Because even though like while Shara has granted mercy, I would say to certain religious groups, particularly I would say my community, the Christian community, he's still not a good guy and stuff. Honestly, I kind of view his views on religious minorities in the same way how Ronald Reagan viewed gay people. Like whereas Reagan, he was very like, I wouldn't say supportive, but he was kind of tolerant in a way towards gays and homosexual, as in like while he does despise these people, he still does like allow them to like live as they want, aside if it was like behind closed doors or within their own communities and stuff. That's kind of the same thing with Shara. Like he kind of views the same. Yeah, he views the religious minorities the same way as Reagan views gay people in a way. That's kind of how I feel. So yeah, and as for Assad, I do support like him paying for his crimes and everything. But all in all, even if he does spend the rest of his life in Moscow and stuff, that really like doesn't bother me at all. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of like it's kind of fitting in a way, because if you have like fucking war criminals like Bush, Tony Blair, and even Cheney, who managed to live his life and then he died like peacefully, and like you see him buried now and stuff. It's absolutely an injustice that these people are still walking around. And if that were the case, then Assad also has the right to basically live and let live, like to live freely how he pleases. And I say live freely in quotes because of course he is under house arrest. But I mean, of course, his fortune is kind of like is kind of a lot better than what it would have been if he would have stayed behind in Syria or compared to Maduro. And also, it's kind of correct for him not to stay in Syria and just like leave, because honestly, like I said that I support him being sent to the Hague, and because the Hague would provide would provide a strong sense of justice compared to Syria, whereas Syria, I feel like it would be like completely filled with bias, and there probably wouldn't be a trial. Actually, they'd probably just, like I said, give him the Gaddafi treatment, and that would be that in a way. So yeah, so I'm kind of glad that didn't happen. And also for him staying and like getting and for him staying was for him like leaving was kind of the right thing to do, because if he were to stay and they were to treat him like Gaddafi, that would have just inflamed sectarian tensions even more with the Alawites. So so in a way it was kind of good that he didn't stay, because then it would raise tensions. Usually countries that tend to execute their own leaders within their own soil, besides Europe, usually tend to not go well for the country. Like you look at Afghanistan, what they did to the Afghan leader. I'm talking about during the 90s when the Taliban first took over, not in 2021, because when you have Ghani, like he managed to flee. But I'm talking about the first former ruler. Yeah, they actually killed him. And then you have Gaddafi, how he was killed in Libya, and then you look at Libya right now, and then you look at Iraq when they executed Saddam Hussein. Iraq then went through a whole myriad of problems and stuff. Right now they're doing better, but yeah, before they were going through growing pains, So then you have Iraq. So yeah, you have plenty of nations where when you viciously kill their leaders, it doesn't look good for them. Obviously, you have countries like Italy where they did kill their leader, like they killed Mussolini, but Italy is doing fine. And then you have Romania where they killed Ceausescu and his wife, and they're also I say Romania is doing fine, like in a civilian kind of way, but all in all, their government is fucked though, because they kind of cancel this one presidential election because this one candidate that advocated for sovereignty and stuff was kind of disqualified, and then they had to do a redo where this one globalist pro EU candidate won over this another sovereignist. So yeah, basically Romania is fucked like just right now. I mean, not in a civilian sense, but in a government sense. So yeah, like that's not working out for Romania. But hey, that's what happens when you're a vassal state to the U.S. empire and to Europe. So yeah, so then you have that, and as I said, another thing that I was glad that Assad staying was that like it prevented like I said, the dangerous extremist people from like either taking power in Syria or forming their own gangs and stuff. You have one person, one notable like terrorist, basically named I hope I'm pronouncing his name wrong. It's Abdul Sarut. I guess for those of you guys who don't know, he used to be like a Syrian soccer player. Then became a rebel soldier during the civil war and stuff. Funny enough, though, despite him being like mostly celebrated to mostly being iconic to Syrians and stuff, he's never really won a battle during the civil war at all. Like he just said that he participated in the siege of Homs and the siege of northern Homs, but both these battles resulted in the Syrian government victory. And then of course you have the 2019 Syrian offensive, and he was then killed there. So honestly, the guy's a fucking loser. I don't get like why. I mean, of course, the reason why he's publicly celebrated is mainly because of his songs and his chants and stuff. He's a very charismatic leader, and that's basically the only reason why he's massively celebrated. All in all, he was not I mean, the fact that he managed to survive for 8 years. I mean, he's I guess a great soldier and avoid being killed. But in terms of participating in battles, he hasn't done shit really. So yeah. I mean, yeah, the guy's a big fucking loser. You can never compare it to the great Hassan Nasrallah, or even say Monty Melkunian of Armenia, who literally led a few winning battles during the Nagorno-Karabakh war. Yeah, those two individuals were real, battle-hardened warriors that actually won a few battles, despite, of course, both of them kind of lost the war in a way later on. Whereas Sorut, he didn't do shit, and he's also a very dangerous individual, making songs of killing minorities and stuff. So of course I'm glad that the bastard is dead. Now of course when I say glad that he's dead, I'm saying glad in a way much obviously when there's a school shooting or a massacre happens, and then of course you kill the person in self-defense, so that kind of way, of course, not in a vengeance kind of way. And bear in mind, of course, he was also killed. He was also killed during battle, so of course in a way he was killed in self-defense. So that's good. So. But basically, it prevented people like that from gaining power, or basically mainly forming a new militia or gang group that would have been a persistent thorn in the small minority communities, both Christians, Druze, Alawites, and the Kurds. So so it's good that they got rid of him. And also one more thing, if you guys want to know who this guy is, of course you could look it up. It's also on Callum's video. The video that I'll leave a link. It's basically it's the image of this cheerful looking young man that he's kind of brown skinned with black hair. Cheerful looking man. It's at that part where he goes to this store that sells pictures of Saddam Hussein and also a lot of Islamist Islamist accessories, I would say, flag specifically. But yeah, it's at that part. So you guys will see who I'm talking about. Yeah, that's Abdul Sorut, that terrorist, I'd say. So yeah, so you could say Assad, continuing the fight in the civil war and stuff. It's to prevent people like that from gaining power, like him staying in and preventing these these groups from gaining power and stuff was kind of necessary in a way to prevent things from going out of hand and stuff. So yeah, I guess it's 9:52. That's probably all I would say. I hope I said everything. I mean, I think I did, but all in all, it is kind of a tragedy with what happened. But I'm just glad that it didn't turn out as bad as it is. And all I would just say is that I do still hope for peace to persevere in Syria. I know I did say about me about my respect and obviously I said I supported the Assad regime mainly, but it was mainly out of a tactic because I believed it to be a lesser evil. Because the thing is though is that if Wahhabism, like extremism, wasn't a problem in Syria, and of course if the U.S. empire and Israel were not a problem, and if Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia did not have any toxic influence that would seep into the country, then of course Assad's rule is like no longer needed. Then I would gladly support the overthrow of his regime for like for more peaceful, like democratic kind of government, and not like obviously with Assad's rule, even though it is secular, it's like very Orwellian and totalitarian kind of government. So yeah, I don't approve of that, and that is my beliefs. I only was in the support mainly just because I thought this kind of option, especially preserving its sovereignty, would be the most ideal for the country. So yeah, that's about it. Obviously, I guess maybe there could have been maybe some more I could talk about, but I think that is probably enough. And I could talk more about it in some other videos, but all in all, I'll just leave it off here. But those are my views of it, and I do hope that peace will persevere in Syria, that for all groups, both Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Alawites, Christians, Druze, Kurds, would live in peace and harmony, and for their country to remain as it is a peaceful, like multi-ethnic, multi-religious country that that should be viewed as a virtue of what it is, and what it's supposed to be, a very tolerant society for all people to be in, because we're all God's children, and that's what I want it to be for the country. So yeah, that's about it. That's as much as I could say. It's over an hour though, so that's pretty good. But there is some stuff, like I said, that maybe I would like to speak about. I guess in regards to like sovereignty and and everything, but maybe I probably delve into that like much later. But that's all I could just speak of right now. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next gameplay series, which will be The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Alright, bye everyone.